They called him the protector of the North. But legends never sleep. They awaken when the world forgets what mercy means. Tonight, the mountain will remember its king. This is Irish the Giant, The Rise of the Mountain King, Part 2. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what comes next will shake the earth itself.
5 winters had passed, yet the tale of Irish had not faded into silence. It had sharpened into legend. Farmers still whispered his name beside the fire. Soldiers muttered it on their night watch, and mothers soothed frightened children with songs of the giant protector. Yet those who truly knew spoke of him with deeper awe, not merely as a towering figure, but as the man who could walk among them by day and rise as a giant when the world demanded a shield. Word of him traveled like a slow-moving tide, and at last it reached the carved oak desk of King Alaric of Eldoria. The rumor was brought by a grizzled commander fresh from the Eastern Front, who laid down a crude drawing, a man swelling into a giant, wielding a tree trunk as a warhammer. Alaric, whose ambition gleamed sharper than the gilded edge of his sword, studied the drawing with a hunter's stillness. His council dismissed it with nervous scoffs. A fable, they insisted, a trick of frightened peasants. But Alaric saw more. He felt the shifting balance of power, the southern warlords rising, the mountain tribes pressing. If such a man existed, one who could become more than mortal, then he was no fable. He was a weapon worth bending the world for. Send riders, Alaric commanded, not soldiers, the royal guard, robed in gold. They will not demand his presence. They will entreat it, with gifts, with honor, with respect. And so the summons went forth, bearing promises of a dukedom, lands rich and green, a treasury of jewels. But the true lure was spoken last, the honor of saving thousands, where once he saved only a village.
The messengers found Irish not in some lonely wilderness, but among his people, hauling the massive beam of a new long house into place. He stood as a man, sweat shining on his brow, his strength already enough to lift what would take 6 others. Yet, when the armored riders approached, they faltered at the sight in his eyes, calm but vast, as if holding a storm beneath their surface. Their words spilled forth, wrapped in ceremony and gold, but Irish's face betrayed little. He listened, then dismissed them with a promise of his answer at dawn. That evening, as shadows stretched long, he sought Astrid. He found her by the sacred stone, the runes glowing faintly in the moonlight, her staff resting lightly in her hand. She looked at him before he spoke, already knowing. "The king offers me chains of gold," Irish said, his voice heavy as thunder. "A chance to guard the realm itself, yet I fear the chain more than the honor. Tell me, guardian, is this destiny or a snare?" Astrid's eyes were steady, deep as the roots of the tree she once guarded. "Honor is never false, my giant," she said softly, "but chains forged of gold bind tighter than iron. You may shield the realm, but the question remains, who will shield you?" The journey from the mountains to Eldoria was lined with faces, wide-eyed children, wary farmers, soldiers who gripped their spears tighter at the sight of him. Irish walked as a man most of the way, preferring the quiet of his smaller frame. But when the road grew dangerous or the curious pressed too close, he let the change ripple through him. In the space of a breath, he became a towering giant, each stride shaking the earth, his shadow stretching across the fields. By the time he reached the city, rumor had already outpaced him. the protector of the North, had come. The gates of Eldoria yawned high, yet even they groaned when he bent to pass through. Within the throne hall, marble pillars soared like a forest of stone, but to Irish they seemed as fragile as saplings. The courtiers hushed, their whispers sharp with fear and awe, as the man who could be both kin and colossus stepped forward. King Alaric descended from his throne with deliberate calm. He was not tall, not broad, yet his presence was iron. He did not gape at Irish's size, nor shrink from the weight of his gaze. Instead, he smiled, the kind of smile honed by years of ruling men. "Irish," he declared, his voice clear and sharp as steel drawn from its scabbard. "Protector of the North, you save one village. I offer you the chance to save millions." The words hung in the vast chamber, heavy with promise. Irish's hand brushed the bronze amulet at his neck, a gift from Astrid, grounding him. His voice rumbled low, not raised in anger, but steady as stone. "I serve the folk of my mountains, their hearths, their fields, their children. If I leave to guard your crown, who will guard them?" Alaric was ready. He lifted his hand, encompassing the banners, the guards, the very city around them. "My royal guard will take their place, 1,000 sworn swords under your elder's command. Your village will be safer than my throne." From the archway, Irish saw his own villagers, men and women who had traveled with him to witness this parley. Their faces bore no suspicion now, only hope. They needed protection, the king's favor, a shield broader than their valley walls. A silence stretched. Then Irish closed his eyes, and for a moment his form shifted, bones lengthening, skin tightening, until he towered above the king, a living judgment. Gasps rippled through the court, but then, just as easily, he shrank again, returning to the size of a man. The demonstration was not for fear, it was to show he chose what he was. At last he bowed his head. "Very well, King Alaric, I will stand at your side. But hear me, my first oath remains to the small folk. Betray that, and no army nor crown will shield you from me." Alaric's smile widened, genuine this time, though it glimmered with triumph. "Done. The giant general is ours. Let all the world tremble at Eldoria's new dawn."
The first campaign began not with banners or horns, but with silence. Irish stood at the front of Eldoria's army, not behind them. His presence alone was a weapon. To the soldiers, he was both a man and more than a man, a commander who could stride as one of them or transform into a siege tower of flesh and iron when battle demanded. The Southland Duke had long been a thorn in Alaric's side, hiding behind fortresses older than memory, boasting that no king's army could breach his walls. He had never accounted for a giant who could tear the gates off their hinges. At dawn, Irish walked before the army in his man's form, his cloak trailing in the mist. He turned once, his eyes sweeping across the ranks. "Fight as though your kin are behind you," he told them, his voice deep but calm. "Because they are. This field is their hearth tonight." Then he let the change take him, his skin stretching, his bones rising until he loomed above the lines, a mountain with eyes. The men roared, their fear swallowed in awe. The battle itself was brief, brutal. Irish fought with the strength of a storm. When the Duke's cavalry thundered across the plain, he met them alone, his hammer, carved from a whole trunk of ironwood, swinging in arcs that shattered horses and men alike.
Shields crumpled like bark beneath his blows. The earth shook where he struck, and entire ranks folded, screaming under his reach. The fortress that had stood for centuries fell in a single morning. Irish, in giant form, wrenched its gate from the stone and flung it into the courtyard. The defenders, hardened veterans, dropped their weapons, some kneeling, some simply staring in numb disbelief. What could stone or steel matter against this?
The victory was absolute. Word of it spread faster than fire and dry grass. In taverns and barracks, his name changed, no longer just the Protector, but the Giant General. Kings to the west who had gathered troops for war now sent envoys with gifts instead, bowing before Alaric's newfound might. The world bent around the legend that walked at the king's side. But as Irish stood on the battlements of the conquered fortress, looking out over the fields littered with broken bodies, the cheers of his men seemed distant. His hands, massive and blooded, trembled slightly. He remembered when those same hands had lifted beams for a longhouse, when they had saved children from rivers. Now they only crushed, destroyed. That night, he sat alone by a fire outside the fortress walls. He did not eat. The smell of blood clung too close. He thought of Astrid, of her words, "Power without guidance is like a river with no banks." The king had given him purpose, yes, but whose banks guided this river now? Alaric's ambition, not his own. When the men toasted his name, he smiled faintly and raised his cup, but his heart was heavier than any iron crown. He was no longer just a shield. He was becoming a sword. And swords, he knew, cut both ways. Victories on the battlefield never silence all enemies. They only drive some of them into darker places. Among the Southland's broken ranks was a commander named Lord Cale. He had once fought under a duke, but Irish's hammer had shattered that man, and Cale was left with nothing but cunning and hate. He knew the giant could not be beaten in open battle. Giants were not felled by swords, they were felled by shadows. Cale studied Irish carefully. He listened to every rumor, every fireside tale. He learned that the giant still returned to his mountain village when the wars allowed, that he carried not just strength, but a heart that still beat for the simple folk. That was his weakness, not his size, not his hammer, his loyalty. So Cale plotted. He gathered his followers, soldiers too proud to bend the knee, mercenaries who had lost family to Irish's campaigns, bitter men who needed little fuel for hatred. He armed them not in their own banners, but in stolen ones, the polished blue and gold of the Eldorian Royal Guard. Their armor was perfect, down to the gilded lion stitched into their cloaks. To any witness, they would be the king's men. Weeks of silent preparation led them into the northern passes. Snow fell heavier with each mile. Villagers along the trail greeted them as friends, believing them to be the promised garrison the king had sworn to Irish. Smiles welcomed them. Doors opened. And then before dawn, those same doors became kindling for fire. The attack came swift and merciless. Irish's village, unprepared for betrayal, was caught in the silence of sleep. The false guard moved with practiced cruelty, cutting down men who reached for tools, not weapons, driving mothers and children into the cold, burning longhouses to the ground. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The king's real guard, stationed further down the mountain, never heard the screams.
Kale's diversion had drawn them miles away, chasing shadows while the true slaughter unfolded. By the time they marched back, the snow was already black with ash.
Miles away, Irish was at a forward fort, overseeing its walls. A boy stumbled into camp, face bloodied, clothes torn, his breath ragged with frost. He was no soldier, just a villager, no more than 16, whom Irish had known since he was small. The boy collapsed at Irish's feet, his voice breaking on a single word: betrayal. Irish did not wait for more. He didn't need to. The boy's eyes told the whole story, eyes that had seen fire, death, and a cruelty that no child should. The giant ran. His strides swallowed miles, his heart hammering louder than war drums. Forests blurred past, snow split under his feet, a roar rose in his chest, not battle fury, but grief already sharpening into something colder, something absolute. When he reached the valley, the world seemed to stop. The longhouse he had raised with his own hands lay in ruin, charred beams jutting like broken ribs. The sacred stone was smeared with blood. Bodies lay twisted in the snow, small and still, wrapped in the simple cloth of his people. Irish dropped to his knees, the weight of his body shaking the ground. His massive hands trembled as he lifted a half-burnt tabard from the wreckage. Blue and gold, the Lion of Eldoria, the king's colors. The proof was there, soaked in ash and blood. His people had not been forgotten. They had been slaughtered by the very crown he had served. Irish bowed his head, the ironwood hammer slipping from his grasp into the snow. And in that silence, where fire met frost, something inside him broke. Not the kind of break that weakens, the kind that reforges. What rose inside him was not rage that burned fast and wild, but a wrath that promised no end. Irish did not return to Eldoria as a general. He came as judgment. The gates of the capital were iron and bronze, meant to hold back armies for weeks. He tore them apart in a single pull. The sound was not of battle, it was of the world itself breaking. Sparks rained as the shattered doors collapsed into the streets, and the people who had once cheered his name fell into silence. He walked through the city like a storm given flesh. His hammer dragged behind him, carving grooves in the cobblestones. Guards who moved to stop him faltered at the sight of his eyes. Eyes that held no mercy, no hesitation, only the frozen fire of a man whose heart had been turned to ash. They scattered before him, knowing that steel could not stop grief made into wrath. The throne room doors did not open, they shattered under his hand. King Alaric was waiting, his face pale but unflinching, robes gleaming blue and gold. The sight of those colors, those very colors, tightened something in Irish's chest until the air around him seemed to crack. You. The word was not spoken. It was torn from the depths of him, shaking the marble floor. His next words roared like an avalanche. You swore an oath. You sent your men to slaughter them. My people, my blood. He raised his hammer and brought it down on the crest inlaid in the floor, the Lion of Eldoria. Marble split like kindling. For the first time in years, Alaric's mask of perfect command wavered. His hand flew to the hilt of his ceremonial sword, though he made no move to draw it yet. His voice rang out, firm but strained. By the light, I swear I gave no such order. Whoever did this wore my colors to deceive you. My command was to protect your home, not burn it. But the words washed over Irish like wind on stone. He saw only the tabard in the snow, the faces of the dead.
His grief had no room for reason. His roar split the air, and he lunged, his fist closing like a mountain crashing down to crush crown and king alike.
Alaric moved, faster than a man weighed by robes should. He twisted aside, the blow shattering his dais into rubble. His counselor shrieked and scattered. "The vaults!" he bellowed, his voice carrying the edge of desperation. "Release the seals!" Hidden panels burst open along the walls. From shadowed passages, soldiers poured forth, not ordinary men. They bore weapons that pulsed with blue runes, steel that shimmered with ancient light. Along the walls, massive ballistae cranked into place, not fitted with bolts of iron, but with spears of crystallized flame. The king had been preparing for this very moment. The first shot struck Irish in the shoulder. He staggered, not from pain, but from the unnatural cold that spread through his chest, a poison frost fire meant for his kind. He bellowed, swinging his hammer, smashing one of the glowing ballistae into dust. But more bolts followed, searing into him, burning not flesh, but spirit. Alaric drew his sword at last. The blade was fire and silver, older than his line, forged to strike down giants. He slashed across Irish's thigh, the wound hissing with magic that numbed muscle and bone alike. The chamber became chaos, stone shattering, marble falling in slabs, the throne room tearing itself apart under the weight of a god-sized fury and a king's desperate defense. Irish staggered back, smoke pouring from his wounds, breath ragged. He knew then he could kill Alaric here, break him, break the crown, end the kingdom in a single blow. But he would fall too. The magic was eating him alive. Survival screamed louder than vengeance. With a final swing, he smashed open a wall of the throne room, sunlight and dust flooding in. Then he turned and hurled himself through the gap, vanishing into the city like a wounded dod, leaving the ruins of Alaric's hall trembling behind him.
Irish's escape was a blur of pain and rage. He fled through the smoking breach of the shattered throne room, his massive form lurching like a wounded mountain. Each step cracked stone and tore earth, but the frost fire lodged in his shoulder spread deeper, numbing his arm, and the wound in his thigh burned like a forge. He did what Astrid had taught him years ago. He forced the change. With a growl that shook his chest, he shrank back into his human shape. The pain nearly drove him to the ground, but the smaller body demanded less strength, and he could stagger forward where the giant would have collapsed. Behind him, the king's hounds bayed, and the thrum of war drums rolled through the night. They were hunting him. Through forest and river he dragged himself, sometimes crawling, sometimes stumbling, always moving north. His blood left a trail that glimmered faintly in the moonlight, poisoned with magic. When his human form failed him, he shifted again, swelling into the giant long enough to wade a river or crash through a thicket, then shrinking back down before the wounds consumed him. The power that had once made him feel invincible now drained him with every change. At last, half delirious, he reached the valley where his village had once stood. The air was heavy with smoke and silence. Charred beams jutted from the ground like broken ribs. The longhouse was ash. No voices rose from the ruins, only the whisper of the cold wind moving through empty earth. By the great stone, the sacred marker where he had first learned who he was, Astrid waited. She was seated on a low stool, a small flame burning before her, as if she had been waiting all this time for him to return. Her moss-colored eyes lifted as he stumbled toward her, and for the first time since his transformation, Irish felt as though he were a child again, seeking shelter. He collapsed at her feet,
his body trembling between shapes, his wounds oozing black smoke where the king's magic had struck. She bent over him, hands steady, her touch cool as she pressed herbs into the burning wounds. The pain flared, then dulled into something tolerable. "You knew," he rasped, his voice thick with ash and grief. "You knew I would return broken." Astrid's gaze did not waver. "I knew you would return tested." She smoothed the sweat-damp hair from his brow with the care of a mother, though her words carried the weight of prophecy. The golden chain was always meant to shatter. The king's promise was never your destiny. It was a snare to measure your strength. Iris clenched his jaw, the memory of his people's screams clawing at his chest. "They are gone, Astrid. My village, my family. I guarded strangers while my own home burned." His massive hand curled into the soil, trembling. "What purpose remains when everything I swore to protect is dust?" Astrid lifted her staff, tapping the runes etched into the sacred stone. The carvings glowed faintly in answer. Her voice dropped into the rhythm of the old tongue. "You are not only the shield of men, Irish. You are the last son of the forgotten kings, the giants who walked the earth before memory. The fruit awakened what slept inside you, but the crown," her voice faltered, reverent, "but the crown will restore what was lost." His head lifted, eyes bloodshot and burning. "Crown?" Astrid pointed toward the jagged peaks beyond the valley, their summits veiled in perpetual mist. "The mountain of sighs. There lies the throne of your kind, buried in ice and silence. Upon its altar rests the giant king's crown, forged when the world was young. If you would avenge your people, not with blind wrath, but with true justice, you must claim it." Iris tried to rise, but his wounds dragged him back down. His voice cracked with exhaustion. "I can barely stand, Astrid. I am no king. I am a broken shield." Her expression softened. "All kings are broken before they are crowned. That is the price. If you surrender now, you are nothing but a story half told. If you rise, Irish, you are the beginning of an age." The words settled in him like iron. With a groan, he forced himself up, leaning on his hammer as though it were a crutch. His body trembled, every wound screaming, but his gaze fixed on the mist-veiled peak. The man who had once only wanted to protect a village now stood at the edge of a destiny that would decide the fate of kingdoms. He exhaled, tasting ash and frost, and whispered, "I will climb." The climb began at dawn, though the sun never truly touched the mountain of sighs. Its peaks were veiled in a constant shroud of mist and storm, as if the heavens themselves guarded the secrets buried within its stone. Irish's body was failing him. Every step up the jagged slope sent fire through his thigh where the king's sword had cut deep, and his shoulder still bled faintly with a black smoke that no herb could fully cleanse. He shifted between forms, giant when the cliffs grew sheer and impossible, man when his wounds made the giant's weight unbearable. The changes left him dizzy, but he pressed onward. He had promised Astrid he would climb, and so he climbed. The mountain did not welcome him. The wind screamed with voices, not of air, but memory. They were whispers of sorrow, the cries of his long-dead kin who had once ruled this world. "Turn back," they seemed to wail, "for grief is all that waits above." At times the voices sounded like his own people, the laughter of children he had saved, the frightened cries from the river, the last screams of his village. They clawed at his will like icy fingers, but Irish ground his teeth and kept moving. Then came the sentinels. At first they were only boulders, slick with moss and half buried in snow. But as he neared, the earth shuddered and the stones rose, giant shapes of living rock, faceless and ancient. Their movements were slow, but their strength was greater than steel. Irish drew upon his dwindling power, swelling into the giant once more. The clash shook the mountainside. Stone fists slammed against his hammer, sparks flying where enchanted rock met ancient ironwood. He fought not as a conqueror, but as a desperate man, every swing of his weapon an act of survival. One by one, the sentinels crumbled, falling back into lifeless rubble. When the last collapsed, Irish sagged to his knees, the mountain trembling beneath him. His lungs burned, his vision swam, but still he climbed. Days blurred together. He crossed frozen streams that cracked under his weight, crawled through caverns where frost dripped like blood from jagged stalactites, and dragged himself up slopes where the snow threatened to bury him whole. Sleep came in shreds, haunted by dreams of his village and the faces of the fallen. Each morning he rose weaker, yet each night he lay closer to the summit. At last he found it. Hidden behind a veil of ice and spray, a vast archway of megalithic stone rose from the cliffside. Its runes burned faintly, casting a pale glow through the mist. Beyond the archway, a tunnel descended into silence.
Irish passed through. The air changed instantly, heavy with power. The world outside ceased to exist. He was walking not through a mountain, but through a memory. Walls etched with scenes of giants hunting beneath the stars, building cities of stone, crowning their kings beneath firelit skies. His footsteps echoed like thunder, as though the mountain itself acknowledged him. At the heart of the labyrinth, he found the chamber. It was circular, vast, lit only by a single shaft of light from the ceiling. At its center stood a pedestal of black stone, and upon it rested the crown. It was not a thing of beauty. Forged of iron, dark as midnight, jagged and rough-hewn, it looked more like a piece of the mountain itself than a crown of kings. At its peak burned a sapphire the size of a clenched fist, its depths alive with an ancient, cold fire. The weight of it filled the room like a presence, and Irish's knees threatened to buckle beneath its silent demand. Then came the voice, not spoken aloud, but rising from the stone, from the mountain, from the very blood in his veins. Power demands purpose. What is yours, child of fruit and stone? Irish closed his eyes. The ache of his wounds, the taste of ash from his village, the memory of children's laughter now silenced, all of it rose in him like a tide. He wanted vengeance, yes, but vengeance was a fire that devoured without end. His hand shook as he whispered the only truth that remained. My purpose is to protect, to shield the small from the cruelty of the great. If I must break the world to keep that oath, then let it break. The chamber trembled. The sapphire flared, its green fire spilling across the walls. The runes blazed. Irish staggered forward, his massive hand reaching for the iron crown. It was cold as death against his palm, and yet it fit as though it had always been his. When he lifted it from the pedestal, the mountain itself
seemed to sigh. The silence was absolute, heavy, expectant. He did not place the crown upon his head at once. He held it before him, feeling its weight press into his spirit. Then, with a breath that shook his chest, he lowered it onto his brow. The world changed. When the crown settled upon his head, the mountain held its breath. The iron was cold, almost painfully so, as if the metal itself remembered the weight of centuries. It pressed against Irish's brow, searing through skin and bone, carving its presence into his very spirit. His breath caught, his vision dimmed. The world folded inward until there was only the thrum of the crown, steady, patient, eternal. Memories not his own poured into him, cities carved into cliffs, halls filled with laughter so deep it shook the stars, battles fought before the first human kingdom drew breath. He saw his ancestors, giants with eyes like stormlight, and felt their power and grief flow into him like molten stone. When he opened his eyes again, the sapphire at the crown's center blazed with living light. The chamber quaked, the runes flared, the walls began to move, not collapsing, but shifting, turning like gears within the bones of the mountain. Before him, the stone parted. A crack of blue fire split the air, widening into a gateway. Beyond it lay a realm without time, a place of silence and frost, where the sleeping giants had lain entombed since the world forgot them. The first sound to return was a heartbeat, not his own, larger, older, then another and another, until the air trembled with the slow rhythm of awakening. They came forth one by one, emerging from the rift like mountains walking into light. Their armor was stone, their eyes lit with the same green fire that burned in the sapphire. None spoke, but their silence was a vow. The foremost among them was a giantess, tall even by their kind, her hair pale as winter sunlight, her hammer forged from blackened star metal. She bowed, one knee cracking the granite beneath her, and when she rose, the others followed, an army older than any king's dream. Irish stood before them, his wounds gone, his strength restored, but his heart heavy with the truth of what he had unleashed. He was no longer simply a protector. He was a ruler, not of men, but of the forgotten kind. He lifted his hammer. The air rippled outward in a soundless command. The giants stirred as one, their feet grinding against the stone. Far below, in the valleys of men, the earth began to tremble. The king's scouts saw it first, silhouettes of impossible size moving through the clouds, descending from the peak. Some prayed, some fled, others simply stared, knowing they were witnessing the end of an age. In Eldoria's high keep, King Alaric stood upon his battlements as the first reports arrived, the words spoken by trembling messengers who could barely stand. An army, Your Majesty, of giants, marching south. For the first time since his coronation, Alaric did not speak. His fingers closed slowly around the hilt of his sword, and in the silence, the sound of the earth's awakening rolled across the land like distant thunder. The age of men had drawn its breath. The age of giants had begun again. The walls of Eldoria trembled long before the first stone was thrown. Dawn rose behind a veil of ash, and with it came the sound, the deep, measured thud of footsteps that were not human. Each one rolled across the plains like distant thunder, steady and unhurried. The city's defenders clung to their battlements, staring toward the horizon as if the sun itself had taken form and begun to walk. Through the mist they came. Giants, scores of them, emerging from the folds of fog, their armor hewn from stone, their eyes burning with the pale fire of the crown that led them. They moved without banners or horns, without the chaos of mortal armies. Their march was silence and inevitability, the quiet of mountains shifting after centuries of stillness. At their head walked Irish, crowned and immense, his iron wood hammer resting against his shoulder. The weight of the crown had changed him, not just in power, but in bearing. There was no rage now, only a grim and boundless certainty. His shadow fell over the valley, and even the wind seemed to bow before it. Behind the city walls, panic rippled through the ranks of men. The king's banners, once symbols of unity, looked fragile against the coming tide. King Elaric stood upon the highest tower, his cloak torn by the wind. The sight below hollowed him. He had known giants as allies, not as executioners. To see Irish like this, crowned, relentless, leading an army that should not exist, was to witness his own ambition come home to claim its price. He turned to his council, but half had already fled. The others waited, pale and shaking, whispering of divine punishment and old prophecies. The king silenced them with a raised hand. He was once our protector. Now we will face what we made of him. Below, Irish stopped before the gates. His voice carried not as sound, but as vibration, rolling through the ground, through the walls, through bone. King of men, your word was a lie, your promise ash. My people lie beneath your colors, and now your walls will share their fate. He lifted his hammer. The giants behind him shifted, the motion of an avalanche preparing to fall. But before the weapon could strike, a small figure stepped forward from among the shadows of his colossal feet. The army, both mortal and giant, fell into stillness. The figure walked alone, wrapped in a tattered cloak of forest green. Her staff struck the earth with a sound so light it should not have been heard, yet every soldier on the wall turned toward it. Astrid. Her silver hair glinted in the gray light, her face lined not with age, but with knowledge too heavy for one lifetime. She walked until she stood in the open space between Irish and the city, her head tilted back to meet the gaze of her towering pupil. Irish, she said, not shouted, not pleaded, but spoken as if the name itself could calm storms. His breath came heavy, shaking the ground. Austriad, stand aside. The time for counsel is done. She did not move. Her voice was soft, yet it carried like a blade through still water. No, the time for truth is here. At her words, a shiver passed through the army. The sky darkened, clouds curling in upon themselves as if to listen. The blood on your hands is not the king's, she said, her staff lifting slightly. The fire that consumed your home was lit by another spite. The king's oath was not broken, it was stolen. Irish's grip tightened on the hammer. Lies. Her eyes met his, steady, unwavering. Then look. She turned, her staff tracing a circle in the air.
Light, thin as thread, spun outward, forming an image that shimmered above the battlefield. It showed the truth as it had happened. Lord Kael's false soldiers, clad in the blue and gold of Eldoria, cutting down the villagers under banners of deceit. And behind them, in shadow, stood another face, one Irish knew from the king's court. Lord Varen, the king's most trusted advisor. Gasps rippled through both sides of the field. On the battlements, Varen stumbled backward, his face draining of color. The light clung to him like accusation itself. "It was him," Astrid said quietly. "He aided Kael. He whispered in the king's ear, silenced his warnings, and turned Irish's loyalty into a blade against his own heart." The silence that followed was unbearable. The air seemed to hold its breath. Irish's hammer fell, not in attack, but in disbelief. The ground shook, dust rising like smoke. His face twisted, not in rage this time, but in something far worse, recognition. The memory of his village, the children, the ashes, all tangled now with the truth that he had been deceived into this ruin. Varen broke first. With a strangled cry, he turned and ran along the battlements, shoving aside guards, his voice cracking into the wind. "Lies! All lies!" But the soldiers did not follow him. They stood frozen, eyes wide, staring at the man they had once obeyed. Alaric stepped forward, his sword drawn, the silver flame along its edge flaring to life. His voice was rough, but sure. "The giant was betrayed. The oath of Eldoria remains unbroken. The traitor will answer for it." He pointed his blade toward the fleeing Varen. There is your enemy." For the first time in weeks, Irish did not move. His chest rose and fell, each breath trembling with the weight of his realization. Slowly, painfully, he lifted his gaze to meet the king's, and for the first time since his rage began, the fire in his eyes softened. Astrid's staff struck the ground once more. "Then let truth, not vengeance, decide the end of this war." Irish turned, his voice low, almost human again. "Giants, stand down." The command rolled through the army like a sigh of wind through mountains. The Titans stopped mid-step, their weapons lowering, their silence settling heavy over the field. The war that should have ended the world ended instead in stillness. Alaric descended from the walls, crossing the bloodless ground until he stood before the giant king. He looked up, small, mortal, yet unflinching. We have both lost much, Irish, but perhaps not everything." Irish studied him for a long moment. Then he gave a single solemn nod, the kind of nod that seals peace more surely than any parchment. And behind them, far to the east, where the sun finally broke through the clouds, the light fell upon the shattered hammer lying between them. Not a weapon now, but a symbol of what both kingdoms might still rebuild.
The days that followed were not of peace. They were the days before a storm's final breath. Lord Varen was captured at dawn, dragged from the southern woods by the very soldiers he had once commanded. His face was gray with terror, his words tangled in desperate pleas. Under the king's justice, the truth spilled like rot from a cracked barrel. He spoke of Lord Kael, of promises made in secret, and of the massacre planned to break the bond between king and giant. It was not power Varen sought, but control, a kingdom without its king, and a weapon without a conscience.
When Irish heard this, he said nothing. He only stood outside the ruined walls of Eldoria, the iron crown glinting faintly in the morning light. He looked at the city, not as a conqueror or a savior, but as something weary and half-ghost. The King Alaric joined him, his arm in a sling, the silver flame sword sheathed across his back. The two stood in silence for a long while, the air between them heavy with everything that had been lost. "Your wrath nearly broke the world," the king said quietly, "and yet I cannot blame you. You believed what any man would, given the proof laid before him." Irish's voice was deep, rough from the smoke of war. "Belief can be the cruelest chain, my king. It binds even the strongest until truth snaps it." He turned his gaze eastward, to the horizon where Kael's banners had last been seen. "He is still out there." The king nodded. "Then let us end it together." The final campaign was unlike any the world had seen. It was not the clash of nations or crowns. It was a reckoning. Kael's armies had gathered in the mountains, a last desperate fortress carved into the cliffs like a scar. There were men who had followed him out of hatred for Eldoria, but most followed because they feared the giants more than the truth. They expected monsters, but what came for them was something far worse: justice. At dawn, the mountains shook. The king's banners rose beside those of the giant king, gold and iron together beneath the gray sky. The giants moved like living avalanches through the narrow passes, their silent steps scattering enemy scouts before battle could even begin. The king's soldiers advanced between their colossal allies, men and titans fighting as one. The sound of their march was like thunder layered upon thunder, shaking the frozen peaks loose from their moorings. Kael's fortress fired down with flame and steel, but it made no difference. Irish led the charge himself, shifting between man and giant as the fight demanded. Nimble as a hunter in human form, unstoppable as a god in his other. His hammer sang, and the song it sang was the end of deceit.
When the gates finally fell, Kael fled through a mountain pass, his cloak torn, his lies spent. Irish found him alone amid the stones, the world quiet around them. Kael looked up, trembling at the towering shadow before him. "You think this ends with me?" he spat. "You'll never belong to them. You'll never belong anywhere." Irish's eyes softened, not with pity, but with understanding. "You're right," he said simply. And then the hammer fell, and the echo of it rolled across the mountains like the closing of a door. By nightfall, the war was over. The traitors were gone, the banners lowered, and the mountains stood silent once more. The king and the giant walked the battlefield together, not as ruler and weapon, but as men who had both been used by the same lie. When they returned to Eldoria, the people knelt as Irish passed, but he felt no pride, only distance. He had become too vast, too bound to the old powers. The world of men no longer fit him. King Alaric met him one last time at the city's gate, the silver flame sword strapped to his back. "Stay," the king said. "Be the shield of this kingdom again. Let the age of men and giants begin together." Irish smiled faintly, a rare human smile. The age of men must learn to stand without a giant's shadow. He looked toward the mountains, their peaks veiled in mist. "My people are awake now. They need their king, and the world needs balance, not all." Astrid stood waiting at the gate, her staff in hand, her eyes soft with a pride she did not voice. As Irish passed her, she whispered, "You have walked the path of strength and found wisdom at its end. That is the mark of a true king." He paused only long enough to meet her gaze. "And you, guardian, have guided me from the seed to the storm. May the gods remember your patience." Then he turned away, the iron crown gleaming faintly as the setting sun broke through the clouds. His army followed, silent, vast, fading one by one into the fog as if the mountains themselves were reclaiming their sons. The king watched until even the echoes of their steps were gone. Around him, the world felt smaller, yet somehow safer. He knew legends never truly leave. They only walk further than the eyes of men can follow. And in the centuries that came, when thunder rolled across the peaks, the people would still say it softly with awe and warmth and a trace of fear. That is not thunder. That is Irish the giant, the shield who became a king, and the king who chose peace.
Centuries passed, and the world changed its shape. Kingdoms rose and fell like the tide, their names fading into the dust of forgotten banners. Forests crept back over battlefields. Rivers swallowed the roads men had carved in their hunger for power. And through it all, the mountains remained, their peaks crowned in snow, their silence heavy with memory. In the northern valleys, where wind met stone, the people still told a story, not from parchment, but from the heart, spoken around fires when the night grew long and the wind hummed through the trees like an old, patient song. They said there once lived a man named Irish who could walk the earth as one of them, but when the world needed him, he rose higher, his body vast as mountains, his spirit greater still. They said he had fought for men, been betrayed by them, and yet saved them all the same. The wise added more. They spoke of the giant's crown, hidden once more in the frozen temple of the Mountain of Sighs, waiting for the next soul brave or foolish enough to bear its burden. They said the mountain never truly slept. Some nights, when storms rolled down from its heights, the earth would tremble, and the old would murmur, "The king remembers." In Eldoria, a statue still stood by the city's north gate, not of the king, nor of the battles, but of a man kneeling, one hand on a hammer, the other open toward the sky. Its plaque bore no titles, only words that had outlived crowns and wars alike. To the giant who guarded men, even when men forgot how to guard themselves. As for Astrid, some said she walked back into the forest and became part of it, her voice carried by the wind that whispered through ancient trees. Others claimed she was seen years later at the bedside of a dying king, smiling faintly before fading like mist at dawn. But in every telling, one truth remained. The story of Irish was not a tale of strength, it was a tale of restraint, of a man who learned that the greatest power is not in the hand that can destroy, but in the heart that chooses not to. And when the storms gather above the northern peaks and thunder rolls like the slow heartbeat of the earth itself, the children of the valleys still run to their windows, eyes wide with wonder, whispering into the rain, "The giant king walks again."
The age of men ended not in fire, but in forgiveness. Irish walked away from thrones and crowns. Yet when thunder rolls across the northern peaks, they still whisper, "The giant king walks again." If this tale moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe for the next chapter in this myth reborn. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if power and peace demanded the same sacrifice?